Today on the podcast, a book haul from some independent bookshops, a book where everyone is a suspect, and of course, the weekly reveal to what wonderful book I have pulled down from my to-be-read shelf. All of that and more this week on A Novel Review. Hello and welcome to the literature podcast, A Novel Review. My name is Seamus, your host, and together we will discuss, dissect, and explore the wonderful world of literature. And the wonderful world of literature is a vast and dense jungle. So let's start making our way through, one book at a time. Hey everyone, welcome back. Another week, another episode, another book. Same host. My name is Seamus, this is A Novel Review, and today I'm going to talk about this book here, Everyone on This Train is a Suspect, a Murder Mystery. But before we dive into solving that little nugget, I always take a moment to reflect on any mantelpiece moments, something to highlight from the week past. And this past week, I was in an English town called Frome in Somerset, and I'd say the best thing about Frome is that it's got 3 independent bookshops, which of course I've frequented because I love books, if you couldn't figure that out from a book podcast. And I mean, we should all visit independent bookshops because, well, we should. So I got a few books. Let's run through them. The first one is K. Dick's They. This is a wonderful little dystopian, or it's going to be, I'm hoping it's going to be, a wonderful little dystopian novel where the arts is kind of under attack from these people, these eponymous they, these kind of ethereal beings that I assume are just human beings that have taken up arms against the arts in a sense. Here's a perfect little summation. They capture dissidents, writers, painters, musicians, even the unmarried and childless. In military sweeps, they cure these subservies of individual identity. So it's kind of this dystopian novel where if you are somehow involved in the arts, you are targeted as a potential threat because I guess you're being artistic and therefore trying to create new things. I don't know. It just sounds really eerie and really kind of spooky, really creepy, really sad that the arts is under attack in that kind of way. And I guess it's just kind of trying to conform society to some very grey life that I don't really look forward to, but I look forward to reading the book. So that looks good. The second one, J.L. Carr's A Month in the Country. This looks really interesting. It seems to be about a sort of PTSD survivor of World War I, comes to a small town in Oxfordby. The small town is Oxfordby in England, or at least I believe it's in England. And he's there to uncover an artwork that's been on a church wall sort of covered up over time. And it just seems to sort of be about his experiences through the month, which I think I love. The restorative, cathartic nature of art that he uncovers, dealing with PTSD, while also being in the summer sun and a small town where everyone gets to know each other. I'm hoping for, A Year in Provence by Peter Mayle kind of vibes, maybe even The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arman. Those kind of really like nurturing storyline that really kind of plays testament, that really sort of honors the landscape that you're in and sort of, plays testament to it. A really kind of beautiful story that reflects upon, us in the natural world. It's summertime, everyone's in a good mood. So really looking forward to that. Another little novella, which is cool. This next one, Seamus Heaney, Beowulf. Couldn't refuse my name in lights, even though I am not Seamus Heaney. I wish. Seamus Heaney, for those of you who don't know, is a very, very accomplished Irish poet. Could have been a pirate, I don't know. That would have been fun as well. But he did a wonderful translation, at least I've heard he did a wonderful translation of Beowulf. I had to read Beowulf at university, fun fact, and I had a great time doing it. And it's been a long time since I've read it. And I saw it there and felt like reading it again. And I've heard some really good things about, Seamus's version of Beowulf. I know Tolkien also does a Beowulf, and I do have that back in Sydney, but that's at my parents' house. And I'm not in Sydney. I'm in London and I want to read Beowulf, so I bought myself a copy. That's that. The next one is a book I bought for being or looking like potential fun. The Turnglass by Gareth Rubin. It is a story where you can read the first half and then apparently you've got, when you read the first half of the book, you have got a pretty comfortable story that you could stop, but there's a little mystery in it. So what do? You flip the book and get part 2. But here's the wonderful thing about part 2. It doesn't matter which order you read these stories in. So technically there is no part 1 and 2. There's just 2 stories with a mystery running through it, and it's up to you to sort of read them and solve the mystery. Apparently though, yeah, you can read them individualistically and not have to read the second, in terms of they both come to an end that's succinct enough that you don't need to find the mystery, but obviously you'll never know the mystery unless you read the second half. It's called a tête bêche, which is a French word, so I know I've pronounced it wrong. And yeah, it just looks like a wonderful idea for a story. You know, flip the book and get part 2, and it doesn't matter which you read first, part 1 or part 2. There is no part 1 or part 2. Simply 2 stories just put together. So yeah, really looking forward to that flippin' good story. Pun intended. This next book is one I have looked for a long time. Shakespeare's Sonnets, lovely little hardcover. This came from a secondhand bookshop in Frome. It's just called the Frome Bookshop, and it's all secondhand. It's a wonderful little hardcover pocket edition. It's incredibly small. I also had to study these for university. I say I had to study them like I was forced to. I signed up to the classes. I had a lot of fun doing it. And yeah, it was just a great time because these are just masterful, and you read them and you're like, there's no way you wrote all these plus all those plays, all those comedies. Get out of here, you dick. But he did, I guess. So Shakespeare's Sonnets, looking forward to diving back into a few of them when the mood strikes. Housekeeping, as always, if you would like to like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Also, yeah, 5-star reviews, they also go a long way. Please and thank you, and have a good time. Happy listening. Have a good day. Okay, here we go. The main body of work for this podcast. Everyone on this train is a suspect. Everyone listening to this podcast is a suspect. No, you're not. You're all right. But everyone in this train is genuinely a suspect. And that's what I think was so fun about it, because there's so many different, I was going to say narrative voices, but I guess really what I mean to say is egos on this train. I think, well, first I should say this is actually book 2 in the series. It's technically a series, but the first one and second one do seem to be quite individualistic from each other, in that I read this book and I was completely fine. Obviously, they do reference book 1 a couple of times, but it actually has no technical bearing upon the story in this particular book. That I was fine, but it does make me want to go back and read book 1. So I'm going to give a brief overview, a very dodgy overview, because the overviews are generally the foundation of the story, and the foundation of this story is technically book 1, which I haven't read. So it's going to be a very dodgy overview today. First, though, I thought I'd just read the back because it does sort of sum it up in a very succinct way. So it says 6 riders, 5 detectives, 4 days, 3 weapons, 2 murders, 1 train. How can you find a killer when all the suspects know how to get away with murder? So basically, what is this book about? It's about this guy called Ernest Cunningham, who's narrating the story. And in the first book, it's very metafictive, but he wrote this book called Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. And it seems to be that there were some murders going on, and he found himself present at these murders, and it was someone in his family doing it. Or, as the title would suggest, everyone had done it. I don't know. I haven't read the book. But basically, he then started to take down notes. He then survived the ordeal. As he was living through the ordeal, he ended up becoming the inadvertent detective and solving the murder mystery, which then he wrote the book Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, which then went on to get some literary success. So incredibly metafictive. Then, the Australian Mystery Writers Society invited him to their crime writing festival because he's had such great success with this first story. I mean, yeah, I know, very, very dodgy, but that's kind of where we kick things off. Something I loved about this book was the fact that it takes place on a train, because, I mean, Agatha Christie's one of her most famous books is Murder on the Orient Express, which I've also done in this podcast. Go check that episode out because that was a lot of fun. That's neither here nor there though. The reason I say it's a lot of fun is because it's set, I think, in 2022, so incredibly recent. And I don't think there are, and please tell me if there are, but I don't think there are that many train rides left that are really multi-day in the same way that they used to be in the time of Murder on the Orient Express, which I think was 1924 from memory. That could be so wrong though. And what I mean by that is it's taking place on the Garn, which is in Australia, and it's this really long train line that goes from Darwin to Adelaide. And Australia is a very big place. I think it's 70% arid, so 70% pretty much desert land, nothing around. And the train takes 4 days, 3 nights. And there would be vast stretches of land where there's literally nothing around. So what I'm saying is there would be, I think, very few train rides left in the world where you are genuinely on a train for that amount of time and also that isolated for that amount of time. I know there's the Trans-Siberia that goes through Russia and China. I imagine that is quite isolated as well. I'm sure I've heard of one in America as well. My point being, I looked up the not the Murder on the Orient Express. I looked up the Orient Express, which was shockingly expensive. But I looked up that and it's one night and it still goes through quite a lot of densely populated places. So if there was a murder on that, they'd be able to get someone to you pretty quickly to figure that stuff out. Whereas on this one, they're obviously incredibly isolated. So I think the scene setting for it was perfect in that it's incredibly believable because this is a long train ride and there are people on it that are genuinely isolated and there's nothing else to do. So absolutely love the scene setting. The fact that it takes place in Australia definitely has not swayed my bias as an Australian, but here we are. So the next wonderful thing about this story is, let me just grab the book. The next wonderful thing about this story is because it's a crime writers kind of festival, everyone there is a crime writer. Everyone there loves crime. You know, you wouldn't pay thousands of dollars to go on a train unless you really loved crime writing or these particular authors. And so these authors all have found success in writing crime, which means they've all found success in technically planning murders and solving those murders as well. Now, I want to open the book up to the testimonial because Benjamin has put 2 in there. The first one I'm going to read is Rule number 9, but from S.S. Van Dyne's 20 Rules for Writing Detective Stories, 1928. So this is what it says. There must be but one detective. That is, but one protagonist of deduction, one deus ex machina. To bring the minds of 3 or 4, or sometimes a gang of detectives to bear on a problem, is not only to disperse the interest and break the direct threads of logic, but to take an unfair advantage of the reader. If there is more than one detective, the reader doesn't know who his co-deducer is. It's like making the reader run a race with a relay team. So that's the first one, and I think it's a wonderful, it's a pretty true rule, because in this story, you don't know really who to trust. You naturally trust Ernest because he's the one telling the story. But of course, first, we don't even know if it's a murder because someone's just died on a train. Now, they've died on a train in what is considered suspicious circumstance, but for those on the train, it's not really that suspicious. The workers on the train, it's not really that suspicious because, as they say, a lot of retirees take this train like it's often that sometimes people die. You know, it's a 4-day stretch. Occasionally, someone's going to die. But what happens when you put a melting pot of these minds in there? All these egos of successful writers that know how to plan and execute and solve a murder. Well, their minds would naturally go that this is foul play and that therefore this is murder. So they all start trying to deduce it in their own ways. And we've only got the mindset of one, Ernest. So we naturally, inadvertently kind of trust him, even though he could have easily done it. Now, it's an interesting idea because in the first one, he obviously didn't plan to be where he was. At least we don't know. I don't know. I hadn't read it. But he found himself in this really austere situation where people were being murdered and he was the one that solved the mystery. It's an interesting idea, I guess, because then he obviously sells the book and his publicist says, well, we need book 2 now. Why don't you try fiction? Obviously, non-fiction is out of the picture because what are the chances of this happening again? What are the chances that you find yourself in a situation where people start being murdered again? Very, very suspect. And so Ernest, in my mind, can also be considered a suspect in this story because, well, why couldn't it be him? And this is where I think the second testimonial comes in, which reads, A sequel is an admission that you've been reduced to imitating yourself. And I think that's a really interesting idea. And maybe this is just heightened because I hadn't read book one and I don't know how sort of Ernest explained himself in the first story. But coming into this book, knowing he's been in a similar situation, I instantly became suspicious of Ernest, because what are the chances that you find yourself in a situation like that 2 times within the space of, I think it was about a year, that people start dying in front of you? It seems pretty rare 1 time, let alone 2. So the fact that he's looking for a story because he doesn't know how to write fiction and then people start dying seems a bit sort of, a bit easy for him. So that was, I think, what really drew me into this story, was the fact that it really plays with genre. You don't really know who to trust, but Ernest does say he's going to do a really earnest job in telling you the story, which is where some of the humor comes in for this story. Now, he says he's being truthful, and I guess you've just kind of buy that because it's the only narrative sort of point of view we have. And he says he's going to be really truthful, and I'm going to read a bit of the story here just so you can get an idea of the narrative voice and Benjamin Stevenson writing style and just how sort of fun and fresh and enjoyable it is. Ignoring the fact that I thought and think that Ernest could be the killer, but this is kind of the humor you are given, you're delivered to through the text. If you think you don't already know the rules to writing a murder mystery, trust me, you do. It's all intuitive. Let me give you an example. I'm writing this in first person. That means in order to have sat down and physically written about it, I survived the events of the book. First person equals survival. Apologies in advance for the lack of suspense when I almost bite the dust in chapter 28. The rules are simple. Nothing supernatural, no surprise identical twins. The killer must be introduced early on. In fact, I've already done it and we're not even through the first chapter yet, though I expect you may have skipped the prelims. And be a major enough character to impact the plot. That last one's important. Gone are the days when the butler done it. In order to play fair, the killer must have a name, often used. To prove that point, I'll tell you that I used the killer's name in all its forms exactly 106 times from here. And most importantly, the essence of every rule boils down to this: absolutely no concealing obvious truths from the reader. Now, I loved the fact that he's playing with the genre of murder mystery, because Agatha Christie had that, had the genre of murder mystery to a T. 200 pages long, always followed the rules, but always had it fresh and an inventive way that always kept you wondering what was going on. But instead, Benjamin's like, no, let's flip it on its head. Let's have a bit of fun with it. That is on page 9, page 8 and page 9. He's admitting that he's already said the murderer's name. He's going to say it 106 times. It gives you the opportunity as the reader to play along and follow along. And if you really wanted to, you could take notes in a different way that you would in like a Poirot, because he's told you exactly how many times the murder is going to be mentioned. It's a really fun idea. It really is kind of not really breaking the rules of murder mystery, but kind of bending them so that we can enjoy it in a different way. I will say that is the one thing I kind of disliked about this book, is the same thing I actually liked about it, is this fact that it plays with the mystery genre, because I love murder mysteries and I love purposefully being, ambivalent to the plot in the way that I'm not trying to deduce it. I just want to sit there and be lazy and let Poirot deduce it for me. I could, if I really wanted to, sit there with a pen and paper and jot it out. I don't want to, though. I just want to have some fun. But I do appreciate the kind of inventive, well, like I'm saying it's inventive. It might have been done before. It probably has been done before. I've just never come across it before. But if it has, please let me know, because I would happily read more of these books. But basically what I'm saying is that I'm glad not every murder mystery is like this book. But I do really enjoy the kind of fun, fresh narrative style that was employed here. In fact, it's kind of very much, if you put Murder on the Orient Express with Knives Out, that kind of, it's a humorous take on the murder mystery that really makes it fun. But it's also serious because people are still dying. So there is an element of seriousness to it and terror, I guess, because you don't really know what's going on. But yeah, Knives Out's probably a good example because that was like a fun story. And it was, this was really fun. I am absolutely trying not to spoil any of the plot. I think I might have let slip one thing, which is a mystery in itself, but I think I might leave it there because I don't want to spoil any more. It was book 2. I'm definitely going to read book 1 because it was a lot of fun. I read you a few quotes. If it sounds like something you're interested in, check it out, because it was just a good bit of fun, and I mean, not all books have to be a struggle. You can just have a bit of fun with it. So everyone on this train is a suspect. I would rate this a 3.9 out of 5. Let's go 4 out of 5 because for me, it was fresh. I've never come across a book like this before. I had a lot of fun with it. So 4 out of 5. Okay, what am I reading this week? This week I am reading this book by Stefan Zweig, Burning Secret. I'd never heard of this till I saw it in the bookshop. It was on sale, £2, couldn't say no. It is, again, a novella. I'm in a bit of a novella streak at the moment. It is about a baron that goes to a holiday kind of retreat, as they did back in those days. I think it's set in the 20s. And he's looking to get some, and he finds a woman that he thinks will be appropriate. She has a son, and she's kind of ignoring him, and he thinks the best way to get to her is through the son. And so it becomes this wonderful story, and I don't mean wonderful necessarily in that way, but wonderful story. I mean, the interplay between the characters of the baron to the son, the woman to the baron, the child to his mother. The interplay of the characters is phenomenal. It's incredible how all three characters can be so right and so wrong at the exact same moment. It is a great story. Again, incredibly short, 124 pages. I am absolutely smashing through this. It blows my mind. I mean, Stefan Zweig is probably one of the better novella writers out there, probably up there with Chekhov, to be fair. And I mean, this is just another example, but I'd never heard of this one, which just sort of goes to show how good his arsenal is, because this is incredible. The interplay of the characters is just phenomenal, and I would strongly recommend Burning Secret so far. So yeah, I'll talk about that in another episode soon. If you have listened this far, please consider hitting those 5 stars. I would really appreciate it. Also, feel free to subscribe if you're on YouTube. You can head along to the website and support the pod in different ways. But as always, thank you for your attention. So I think it's time to end this episode. Sorry, but to take us away, I think a little sonnet from Shakespeare. Number 152, because I studied this one at uni and I absolutely loved it. And it's still just as perfect as ever. So here we go. The expense of spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action. Until action, lust is purged, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust. Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight, past reason hunted, and no sooner had past reason hated, as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Mad in pursuit and in possession so, had having and in quest to have extreme, a bliss in proof and proved a very woe. Before, a joy proposed, behind a dream, all this the world well knows, yet none knows well, to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell.